We've never tasted anything like this. Hungarian POWs overwhelmed by American camp meals. May 1944, Oklahoma. The buses rolled through gates wrapped in barbed wire, dust devils spinning across the plains like warning signs. Inside, 70 Hungarian prisoners sat in silence, their uniforms stiff with dried sweat and defeat. The heat pressed down from above, the kind that made the metal seats burn through fabric and turned breathing into something you had to remember to do. Private János Farkas pressed his face against the cracked window. 24 years old, a carpenter's son from Debrecen who once smoothed wood in his father's workshop and believed the war would pass him by. Now he was just another number, another captured soldier being delivered to American soil. He hadn't eaten a real meal since the transport ship. His ribs showed through his uniform like the frame of an unfinished house. The bus shuddered to a stop. Outside, Camp Marlin stretched across the Oklahoma plains, wooden barracks, guard towers, endless wire. American soldiers stood watching, rifles catching the afternoon sun. János's stomach clenched. Not from fear, from hunger. "Rouse!" barked the escort officer. The men shuffled off, legs cramping, eyes hollow. János stepped onto Oklahoma dirt for the first time. The smell hit him immediately. Smoke, meat, something sweet, impossibly sweet. He thought his hunger was making him hallucinate. But before we go deeper into this story, if you've ever wondered what it was like to sit at your enemy's table, expecting cruelty, but tasting something else entirely, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Hungary? America? Somewhere else? Because these forgotten moments belong to all of us. The guards marched them past a long wooden building. Smoke curled from its chimney. Through the windows, János glimpsed movement. Racks of ribs, men in aprons, pots the size of wash basins. His mouth watered. He hated himself for it. "You will be fed," the camp captain announced in broken German that some understood. "Geneva Convention, 3 meals daily. You work, you eat." János didn't believe him. He'd heard promises before. But inside that mess hall, Sergeant Cole Ramirez was pulling golden cornbread from ovens, turning racks of smoke-dark ribs, stirring molasses beans that bubbled like lava. "How many we feeding tonight?" asked Corporal Tommy Walker, younger, red-headed, suspicious. 70 Hungarians, Ramirez said, "plus our boys." "We're giving them this?" Ramirez looked at him steadily. "Orders are orders, and every man eats." Morning came too early. A bell clanged across Camp Marlin at 0600 hours. János jerked awake on a thin mattress that was still softer than anything he'd slept on in months around him. 30 Hungarians stumbled from their bunks, bodies aching, minds foggy. "Roll call! Line up!" The guards' English was clipped, efficient. The Hungarians muttered translations to each other, shuffling into formation outside. The morning routine was military precise. Count-off, work assignments read from clipboards, orders given. Some men were sent to repair fences, others to the motor pool, the laundry, the grounds. János was assigned to general maintenance. During the first meal assembly, a lieutenant explained through a translator, "Geneva Convention requires proper treatment. You receive food, shelter, medical care. You work, but you are not slaves. You follow rules, you stay safe." The words felt impossible. János had expected cruelty. Instead, there were schedules, regulations, order. Sergeant Ramirez ran the kitchen like a general commanding troops. He was Texan, broad-shouldered, more comfortable with a smoker than a rifle. His second, Corporal Walker, red to everyone, was younger, quicker to suspicion, slower to trust. The Hungarians reacted to consistent meals in different ways. Some wolfed down food like animals, terrified it would vanish. Others ate slowly, mechanically, waiting for the trick to reveal itself. János fell somewhere between, grateful but guarded. He noticed small things, how the Americans bowed their heads briefly before eating, how they joked with each other over coffee, how they never shouted during meals as if the table was sacred ground. János had learned some English in school before the war. Basic words, yes, no, please, thank you. One morning, gathering his tray, he pointed at the meat and asked quietly, "What?" This question mark, "Ribs," Ramirez said, miming eating. "Rib, from pig." "Rib," János repeated carefully. "Good. Thank you." Ramirez smiled. "You're welcome, son." At night, in the barracks, arguments erupted in harsh whispers. "This is manipulation. They fatten us up for something." "Or maybe they're not monsters." "Don't be a fool. They're still the enemy." János lay on his bunk, staring at wooden rafters, too hungry to refuse the food, too proud to fully trust it, caught between two worlds belonging to neither. The fence section sagged dangerously, splintered posts ready to collapse. János worked methodically, his hands moving with practiced precision, measuring, cutting, smoothing rough edges until the wood felt like silk under his palms. A guard stopped watching. "You carpenter?" János looked up, understanding the English word. He nodded. "My father, Debrecen, small shop." He gestured with his hands, miming sawing, hammering, building. The guard smiled slightly. "My brother's a carpenter, back in Tennessee." They worked in silence after that, but it was different, easier. 3 days later, during a brief rest period, János found a piece of scrap wood near the workshop. His fingers itched for something familiar, something that wasn't about the war. He borrowed a guard's pocket knife and began carving. The small wooden horse emerged slowly, delicate legs, flowing mane, head turned as if listening for something. Sergeant Ramirez passed by the barracks and stopped cold. "Did you make that?" János held up the horse, uncertain. "That's beautiful work." Ramirez turned it over in his hands, admiring the detail. "Real beautiful." Later that week, an American sergeant mentioned casually, "My daughter back in town, she loves horses, collects little figurines." János didn't hesitate. He pressed the carved horse into the man's palm. "For daughter. Gift." The sergeant's eyes widened. "You're giving this to me, to my kid?" "Yes." "She happy, yes?" The story spread through the guard barracks like brushfire. One of the Hungarians made a toy for Mitchell's girl. "Real craftsmanship, too. Not what you'd expect from a POW." Soon, Americans sought János out. Could he fix a broken chair? Smooth a splintered table leg in the mess? Carve a small cross for someone's mother? In exchange, they corrected his English gently, taught him new words. Smoke ring, brisket, sweet tea, laughed with him when he mispronounced things. But in the Hungarian barracks, suspicion grew. "He's getting too close to them. Selling out for extra food. He'll forget where he comes from." János felt the tension like a blade against his ribs. Every act of kindness from the Americans felt like betrayal to his fellow prisoners. Every moment of connection felt like losing himself. He was building bridges, but bridges could collapse from both ends. "Farkas!" A guard called his name during morning assembly. "Kitchen detail today." János blinked, confused. The other Hungarians stared. Kitchen duty was usually rotated, never the same man twice. But the guard gestured firmly, "Come on, they need extra hands." He entered the mess hall kitchen and stopped. The heat hit him like a wall. Wood smoke, sizzling meat, steam rising from massive pots. It was organized chaos. Ramirez commanded the space like a battlefield, Red working beside him with swift, efficient movements. "You!" Ramirez handed János a knife and a cutting board stacked with onions. "Chop, slow, careful." János's hands were sure despite his nervousness. Carpentry had taught him precision. He worked steadily, methodically, while around him the Americans orchestrated their smoky symphony, Ramirez showed him the ribs, massive racks rubbed with salt, black pepper, paprika, brown sugar. We smoke them slow, 6 hours, mesquite wood. He pointed to the smoker outside, where grey smoke curled toward the sky. János watched, fascinated, as they basted the meat with tangy sweet sauce, checked temperatures, rotated racks with the care of surgeons. "What you eat? Back home?" Ramirez asked during a lull. János struggled for words. Gulyás, stew, meat, paprika, potato, and langos, my mother make. Fried bread with sugar. "Fried dough?" Red looked up. "Like donuts?" "Yes, but flat. Big." János gestured with his hands. Ramirez grinned. "Sounds like we need a Hungarian night." Red snorted. "We're not running a restaurant, Sarge. These are prisoners." But even Red softened when he watched János taste the beans, adding salt with the same reverence someone might show handling sacred objects, eyes closing briefly in what looked like prayer. Small gestures accumulated. Ramirez clapping János's shoulder, Red silently sliding him an extra spoonful when no one watched. János carefully cleaning every pot until it gleamed. That night in the barracks the division widened. "You worked in the kitchen. Can you bring us extra?" "You're one of them now, traitor." János lay awake, hands smelling of smoke and spices, unable to explain that the kitchen was the only place where he wasn't just a number behind wire. The evening was quiet. Guards walked their routes. POWs settled onto bunks. The kitchen was winding down, János scrubbing the last pots when he smelled something wrong. Not mesquite smoke, burning hay. An alarm bell shattered the silence. "Fire! Supply barn!" János dropped the pot and ran. Others poured from barracks, Americans and Hungarians both. The supply barn was already engulfed, flames clawing at the walls, sparks spiraling into the night sky like angry stars. This wasn't just camp supplies. The barn held food stores for the nearby town too. Losing it meant hunger for everyone. Guards shouted, trying to push the POWs back behind the line. But instinct overrode orders. János grabbed a bucket. A Hungarian sergeant he barely knew formed a line. Men passed water hand to hand without waiting for commands. Americans and Hungarians, shoulder to shoulder, fighting the same enemy now. Ramirez charged toward the barn entrance, trying to save sacks of flour and crates of canned goods. Red struggled with a jammed door, smoke pouring around him. A burning beam groaned, cracked, began falling. "Red!" Ramirez screamed. János didn't think. He and another prisoner tackled Red sideways. The beam crashed where he'd been standing, showering them with embers and ash. János felt fire bite his forearm. Red coughed violently, gasping for air. The chain continued. Water flew. Men choked on smoke. Skin blistered. But they kept going. Finally, the flames retreated. The barn stood damaged but not destroyed. Half the supplies were saved. The camp stood in stunned silence, lit by dying embers and flashlights. A local officer arrived, face red with fury. Sabotage had to be. Enemy prisoners did this. But the camp captain pointed at the blackened uniforms, the blistered hands of Hungarians and Americans alike. If this was sabotage, why did they risk their lives to stop it? János sat in the dirt, exhausted beyond words. His face was streaked with soot and tears. The smell surrounded him, charred wood, burnt sugar, smoke, a nightmare version of the scent that first greeted him at Camp Marlin. Red stood nearby, still coughing, staring at the Hungarian who'd saved him. Their eyes met across the smoky darkness. No words, just a slow nod of acknowledgement. Morning brought investigators, men in crisp uniforms with clipboards and suspicious eyes. They questioned everyone, guards, POWs, kitchen staff. Rumors spread like the fire itself. Maybe one of the prisoners started it, then pretended to help. Maybe it was an accident. Someone knocked over a lantern. Maybe it was sabotage after all. János was called into a small office. His burned hands shook as he faced the officer across a wooden desk. The man's English was rapid, harsh. János caught maybe half the words, struggling to answer. "Where were you when the fire started?" "Kitchen. Wash pot." "Convenient. You were alone?" "No. Sergeant Ramirez. He there?" The officer's eyes narrowed. "And you just happened to be the first one to notice?" "I smell wrong smell, not cooking smoke. Or maybe you knew exactly when to smell it?" Ramirez appeared in the doorway. "Sir, I need to speak." He testified clearly. János had been in the kitchen under supervision. He'd helped save Red Walker from the falling beam. His burns proved he wasn't hiding with the others, watching from safety. Red was brought in next, still bandaged. He spoke reluctantly, words dragged out like splinters. "The Hungarian pulled me out. If he was the enemy that night, I'd be dead." In the barracks, the POWs argued in heated whispers. "They'll punish us all anyway. Collective guilt." "We helped save their supplies. Doesn't that count for something?" "Maybe we shouldn't have helped. Maybe we made ourselves look weak." But some of the men who'd fought the fire felt something else, something strange and uncomfortable. Pride. They hadn't just saved enemy supplies, they'd saved people. The investigation concluded 3 days later. The fire started from a faulty stove in the barn's corner office. An accident? No sabotage? No conspiracy. The conclusion became a whispered legend around Camp Marlin. The night Hungarians and Texans stood in the same line, passing water against the flames. The Americans' attitude shifted. Guards nodded at prisoners. Some townspeople grudgingly admitted the foreigners had helped save their winter stores. When János walked into the kitchen now, nobody questioned why he belonged there. A week later, the camp commander made an unprecedented announcement. "Special meal tonight for everyone, guards and prisoners, to honor the men who helped save the barn." Ramirez and Red received their orders with wide eyes. "Turn what's left of the supplies into a feast? Sarge, that's impossible." "Then we make the impossible happen." The kitchen became a war room of a different kind. Smokers filled with every rack of ribs they could spare. Brisket rubbed and wrapped. Pots of beans simmered with precious bacon, molasses, onions, cornbread baked in endless trays, filling the air with golden sweetness. Ramirez called János over. "Tonight we cook together, for real. Your mother's fried dough. Can we make something like it?" János's throat tightened. He nodded. He showed them how to stretch the dough, how hot the oil needed to be, the exact moment to flip it. They worked side by side, János and Ramirez and Red frying batch after batch, tossing the golden pieces in sugar and cinnamon. The smell transported János instantly. His mother's kitchen in Debrecen, flour on her apron, her hands dusted white. He had to blink away tears to see the pan clearly. Evening fell. The POWs filed into the mess hall expecting the usual portions. They stopped short. Tables groaned under food, ribs glistening, beans bubbling, cornbread stacked like golden bricks, and plates of fried dough still warm, sugar sparkling under the lights. The Americans sat on one side, Hungarians on the other. But tonight the distance felt smaller, crossable. János took his first bite, ribs that tasted like Texas, dough that tasted like home. His eyes closed. When he opened them, they were wet. "We've never tasted anything like this," he whispered in Hungarian. Around him, others echoed it. Some wept openly. Not from the food itself, but from what it meant. To be honored, not just tolerated, not just fed, to be treated as human in a place built to hold enemies. For one night, the wire faded. The war felt distant, and 70 Hungarians and 40 Americans shared the same table. Weeks passed. The war turned. Rumors drifted into Camp Marlin through newspapers and crackling radios. German retreats, lost cities, bombed factories. the axis crumbling. János heard one word more and more. Soon! Soon you'll go home. Soon this will all be over. The certainty of ending made everything feel fragile. The kitchen became a small sanctuary where future dreams quietly took shape among the smoke and sizzle. One slow afternoon, Ramirez wiped his hands on his apron and asked, "What will you do when you go back?" János stirred beans, thinking, if my town still stands, maybe I open small place. Food, wood, a table where people sit and forget world outside. A restaurant? Maybe, yes, restaurant. Red, listening from across the kitchen, grabbed a scrap of paper and a pencil. He scribbled for a moment, then slid it toward János. "This is my mama's rub for ribs' secret recipe. Don't tell any Texans I gave this to a Hungarian. They'll hang me." János stared at the paper. Salt, black pepper, paprika, brown sugar, garlic powder, cayenne. Measurements in Red's tight handwriting. "Thank you," he said quietly. I give you something too." He wrote carefully in both English and Hungarian, his mother's fried dough recipe. Simple ingredients: flour, water, salt, yeast. But the proportions, the technique, the love, that's what mattered. Ramirez folded it carefully. "I'll keep this safe." Around them, other prisoners talked about the future: farming, carpentry, rebuilding what the war had destroyed. Some still brooded, refusing to hope. But here, in the kitchen, 3 men exchanged something more valuable than food: memory, legacy, proof they'd existed together. History would remember battles and borders, treaties and casualties. But inside Camp Marlin, what people remembered most were recipes, smells, laughter over dented pots. One evening, as storms gathered over the Oklahoma plains, János looked out at the dark horizon. He wondered if the taste of this place would survive when uniforms were packed away and borders hardened again. Would anyone believe him when he told this story? The war ended. Orders were issued. The Hungarians began the slow process of repatriation: paperwork, roll calls, medical checks, last looks at a place that both imprisoned and fed them. János said goodbye in the kitchen. Ramirez pressed a folded, grease-stained card into his hand. "This is the real recipe. For the ribs. You take it home. Promise me you'll use it." Red muttered, "And if you ever open that place, name something after us. Oklahoma smoke or whatever, so people remember." János couldn't speak. He nodded, clutching the card like a Bible. Years passed. The world rebuilt itself slowly, painfully. Hungary fell behind the Iron Curtain. Communication with America became impossible, but some things survived. Outside Debrecen, a small roadside place appeared. Hand-painted sign. Smoke drifting from a homemade smoker built from scraps and memory. Inside, locals queued at rough wooden tables. The menu was strange: traditional gulyas, Hungarian stews, langos with cheese, and one odd addition: Marlin ribs, American style, and Oklahoma dough, fried dough dusted with sugar and cinnamon. János, older now, gray touching his temples, moved between tables with the same careful hands that once smoothed fence posts and stirred beans in a prison camp kitchen. On the wall hung a faded photograph. Men in uniform, American and Hungarian, squinting into Oklahoma sun. Beside it, a framed recipe card stained with grease and age, English words barely legible. Travelers asked, "Where did you learn to cook like this?" János smiled the same quiet smile he'd learned from Ramirez, and answered, "From men who were supposed to be my enemies." If you're watching this and you've ever wondered whether a meal could change how we see each other, whether food could be a bridge between enemies, then you've just seen the proof. This story reminds us that history isn't just politics and battles. It's people, it's tables, it's recipes passed through barbed wire. Hit subscribe if you want more forgotten stories like this. Drop a comment telling me, Could you taste food the same way after living through something like János did? Thank you for watching. Stay curious, stay human. I'll see you in the next one.